It's a pleasure to be in WASD. My name is Danilo Sampaio. I'm from Federal University of Juiz de Fora, Brazil. I'm a moderator of this panel. I'd like to congratulate to Mr. Alan and Petro Dimitriou and their staff organization this event. In this session 9, we have the thematic panel on coalescing the energies of SMEs, small and medium enterprise. The first presentation is Roberto Suarez-Santos. Roberto Suarez-Santos is a training lawyer with experience in European International Labor Law, Deputy Secretary General, International Organization for Employers, Geneva. Please, could you start? Thank you.
Here it is. Well, thank you. Just let me thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here. I think I've been attending also the previous panel, and I found it quite fruitful in terms of discussion, in terms of exchange. So this is also an opportunity for me personally. Beyond that, well, my organization also appreciates this invitation. We have been in contact with the Joint Inspection Unit, but also our president was here in the opening of this session. When we define ourselves, we always define ourselves as a network of representative business organizations all around the world, and that's what our strength is here in the UN system. We are very known in the ILO and also in other UN agencies, but at the end of the day, we are known by some people is because of the network that we have, and that's also the added value that I can bring here. Okay, because we are trying to deal with the issue of partnerships, also within the SDGs goals, also within the cooperation between different agencies, also in the UN system. And what I want to stress here are two areas, two elements. On one side, how business is changing, how the business model is changing. You know, we have been working a lot on the future of work, on the future realities of work, but there is not so much research about the future of business and how now there's this fashionable word which is disrupted, how disrupted the new realities are also for business, for the good and also sometimes for the bad. And I want to refer to that before we refer or will exchange on partnerships, because if we do not take that into consideration, we will not be able to identify ways to have effective partnerships. And then I would like to stress with you from a practical perspective, and when I say from a practical perspective, I say because we are dealing with SMEs and we are working with partnerships, the difficulties that we found very often when we set up a PPP, not just at international level, but sometimes at national level. I don't want to take much time anyway. I will do it quick. So, but please interrupt me if you think that I am, okay? Future of business. Well, we talked a lot about digitalization and, well, changes that this is bringing to the reality of companies. One of the key questions is whether in the future or whether now it's easier or it would be easier or not easier to create a company or it would be easier or not to set up a kind of business unit. Sometimes it's not just a company. Another question related to that is how the survival rate of companies will be in the coming future or it is now. I mean, to what extent creating now well, a business for an entrepreneurship will not just be easier, but also will be more or less difficult to maintain it in time. We do not have answers, concrete answers for that, but we see and we are now attending, and that's thanks to digitalization, that in many contexts, in many territories, there is a good strength to improve the capacity for an entrepreneur to create a business. And we see that, of course, thanks to some institutional reforms, legal reform, but also thanks to digitalization and the new technologies. And that's something that we should not forget. We talk very often also about global companies, and we associate that with multinational companies. But the reality right now is that most of the global companies are small and medium. And that's also thanks to the new realities of business. I mean, you have sometimes companies that, or business units that are very limited in terms of turnover, in terms of employees, but they have also a powerful network, global network, and that makes also a difference. And also we are attending a situation in which we could see that to some extent there is much more fragmentation of business models in terms of dimension of business. There is the doubt of whether we'll go to more multinational big companies or whether we are going to a situation, and I'm talking in a very broad manner. You have to identify, differentiate by sector, by countries, etc. But whether companies will be smaller or bigger, at the end of the day, that's also a very legitimate question. To some extent, we see now some big companies also that are, I wouldn't say using a kind of monopoly, but that are getting bigger on the global scene. But at the same time, we see more and more companies that are externalizing, outsourcing, and this trend is not going to go back. Even if we are now have a risk of having more reshoring in some contexts, at the end of the day, this idea of delegating the way we make business on some critical areas to other units and to have a commercial contract with these other enterprises is there. In fact, one of the key drivers also of success is to have around you as a business service infrastructure. So many companies helping you to survive and to get along. And that's a key element of investment. At the same time, we clearly see, and that has to do with the work of this organization, of all the organizations of the UN system, a clear trend in change of expectations of society in general towards business. And that means also that the way companies are dealing with their supply chain is different, is becoming different from a business perspective, but also from a societal perspective. That means also that those companies that have a leverage also are now trying to influence not just labor and social aspects of other companies, but also the business models of these other companies. And that also applies for headquarters and subsidiaries. The relationship between headquarters and subsidiaries is no longer, I don't think, I mean, I cannot give you strong evidence on that, but I believe that it's also changing because of this new responsibility. All this is also connected with the disruption of the platform economy, and the platform economy, collaborative economy, gig economy. At the end of the day, it's also changing the concept of employer. And we are the International Organization of Employers, but we see that in some contexts, defining what's an employer, when you have just a network, is more difficult. And defining also what is an employment relationship is perhaps going to be challenging. I just wanted to give you these hints because that also has to do with the new reality of partnerships. And from a daily perspective, what we see when we deal with partnerships is that if you are referring to small and medium companies that are also survival in a very competitive environment, you really have to make the business case clear to get them in. In order to do that, first you need an association. And it's not because I am defending my business, which is an employer organization. You need someone to coordinate them, someone above all to give them some element of trust. Explaining to them why this is important for you, why this is going to be a business case for you, and what is the initiative that is worth for you getting involved in. And they really appreciate this service. And that's also something in which we play a role also with the system, with the UN system in general. Beyond that, I want to stress and to share with you three elements in which we have important difficulties that we have to overcome. Because we all talk about partnerships, but sometimes we do not realize, and in the previous conversation was very illustrative in that sense, that sometimes we have communication challenges. The language that we are using here, and I say we because we are very much involved in the system, is not, sorry, I'm going to tell it like that in a very blunt manner, it's not understandable for many small and medium companies. I mean, they can understand the SDG goals, they can understand some objectives that we have at global level on reduction of poverty, but once we start with the processes, they get lost. And that's already a reality for big companies, but imagine for small, medium companies. But the other way around is also important. Sometimes for the system itself, for the public, but also for the international organizations, to understand also the language of the small and medium companies is important. I can give you a very specific example. I don't want to take more time. That also applies to rhythms, to time, to procedures. Meaning by that sometimes when you have a project, it's very difficult to explain for some of these companies why it's taking so long to achieve something that they normally take 1 month or 2 months. And we have to explain well to them the strength of consensus, the strength of having all the system with you means that you have to have proper procedures. But that's something in which we have also to work. And sometimes, and that's also linked to objectives, linked to a communication, the objectives that you can have as a company, as small and medium companies, and the objective that you can have as an international institution is not that it's not exactly the same, but it's not interpreted in the same way. The way you define outcomes, the way you define deliveries, sometimes it's different. And I can give you a very specific example. We are working in an important initiative that we launched, which is the Global Apprenticeship Network, with CEOs of big companies, but also with the small and medium companies, to promote apprenticeships. So once we set this network that is now giving some results, one of the difficulties that we had was that some of these companies had as a delivery objective to recruit more apprenticeships, basically that. Whereas for many institutions, from a more institutional perspective, the objective was to change the institutional and legal framework. And then it took us 1 or 2 years to realize that we were talking about different things in terms of delivery. So it's very important that from the very beginning we clarify what is the delivery for your rate and how do you measure that. Otherwise, sometimes that can create a lot of problems. And finally, and that's my final point, and sorry to take the time for the other speakers, it's something that was said before. For small and medium companies, one key driver of success is that having a partnership with any international organization, through employers' organization or business organization or through other means, doesn't mean necessarily to change what they are doing, but perhaps to change the way they are doing that. It's doing their own business, but trying to put more emphasis on some elements like environmental impact, like social impact, which could be critically important for their competitiveness, for the productiveness, but also for the visibility and reputation. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Roberto. It's very interesting. This theme, I think, so the continuous, the other thematic panel, partnership for innovation, but now in the small and medium enterprise. The reality is very different about the big enterprise, but in this section, we talk the examples for the next experience to change the opinions. And now, I'd like to invite Govind, Venuprasad, coordinator at South Trading Investment Program International Trade Center. Govind has earned degrees in social science, international business from India and UK. Please, could you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think in many ways, what we've heard from our colleague who spoke just before me feeds into what I would like to put to the audience here. But I look at it more from a perspective of how small and medium enterprises can transform, and through that transformation, how they can actually contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll just go through a few examples, and then I think we'll be open to questions, so we don't take too much of the time. I think all of us can agree on one thing, that the global trading system is under stress. Small and medium enterprises play a key role in promoting economic growth as major providers of employment and income. For example, if we focus on just one continent, Africa, 70% of the employment on the continent is by small and medium enterprises. However, what we find is that protectionist sentiment and trade barriers act as constraints to economic growth, they limit employment opportunities, and they prevent marginalized communities and regions from full engagement in the global economy. So, the reality on the ground in many ways poses a great challenge to us actually achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Today I'll just talk through a few examples or vignettes what my organization, the International Trade Center, has done in unlocking the energies of small and medium enterprises as a primary driver of the next wave of global entrepreneurship and sustainable development. As I had mentioned earlier, over 70% of the employment in Africa is by small and medium enterprises. So improving competitiveness and connectivity to regional and global value chains is at the heart of strategies to achieving many of the sustainable development goals that we speak of. In this context, I would like to focus on one aspect of trade, which is South-South trade and investment. It accounts for up to 1/3 of global trade. I think it blends business synergies and development goals, in particular through South-South trade and investment, and this is a central focus of our work in Africa. I think more importantly than how much it actually contributes to global trade today, South-South trade and investment has been growing at an annual average rate of 21% since 2015. I'd like to give one specific country example. India has emerged as one of the fastest growing sources of FDI in developing countries. India's total outward stock of FDI stood at $144 billion at the end of 2016. And when they report figures for 2017, which we should expect in the next month or so, it should have gone up by another $6 billion. There is strong and growing support among SMEs in developing countries to continue to support these South-South linkages. Let me start with one example. Sabrina Merali is an agribusiness entrepreneur from Tanzania, whose company has benefited substantially from its partnership with India. Her business is an integrated food grower and agro-processor operating across Tanzania, Kenya, and Mozambique. We met her from the ITC side in 2015 when QPE, or Quality Pulse Exporters, was a much smaller operation sourcing and selling domestically in Tanzania. Through one of our projects supporting Indian trade and investment in Africa, we worked with Quality Pulse, providing technical assistance, market information, and introducing the company to major pulses importers in India and across Southeast Asia. With increased export markets and consequently greater demand for their product, farmer incomes have moved up, and employment in the pulses sector across the 3 countries I've mentioned have gone up. Not only has our company's success affected the livelihoods of these businesses in Tanzania, but also in Kenya and Mozambique, to where they were able to expand. Clearly, Sabrina's work directly contributes to SDGs 1 and 2 that address reduction of poverty and hunger. In just the last 2 years, to give you another example, ITC as an institution has provided training for over 16,000 agribusinesses across Africa, both directly and indirectly. As well as farming best practices, the training covers the use of sustainable technologies to maximize productivity and quality of output, which are very, very important, because the connection between farm and market, or rather the asymmetry, has been a major cause also for distress. Linking East African agricultural SMEs with Indian businesses is just one example of how our South-South, or even we can call it triangular cooperation, is reshaping the global trade and investment architecture in important ways. Support for these endeavors offers potential gains in terms of both commercial and sustainable development outcomes. In this area of our work, we see contribution on the part of small and medium enterprises to SDG 12, which is about sustainable production. Let me just take another example from Ethiopia, where spices, specifically ginger and turmeric, which are very, very high-value crops, are a major focus of our work with agribusinesses in that country. Through comprehensive research at the local level, we found that low-quality turmeric and ginger were being produced in certain potentially high-yielding areas. But the levels of productivity were due to inefficient post-harvest handling at both the farmer and processor level. Today, through exchanges with India, farmers are using turmeric boiling technology, which is an adaptable technology, farm-level technology, which they have replicated from a farmer's field school manual that we created jointly with partner institutions in India. In addition, new technologies for cooking and drying have also been adapted and are being used. All of these measures are taken from similar technologies in India, another example of a contribution to SDG 12. I think the UN has estimated that achieving the SDGs will require an additional annual $2.5 trillion in investment. And we know that achieving this target will be impossible without significant private sector investment. Through one of ITC's International Trade Center's investment promotion activities, which started in 2016, an Indian small and medium enterprise decided to invest in leather manufacturing in Uganda. The investment will create the capacity for manufacture of 1 million pairs of shoes a year. This is up from a current capacity of close to zero. A major challenge, however, is the availability of quality finished leather. However, this investor from India chose Uganda because they saw the local tanners were willing to upgrade their production techniques to higher value finished leather. So just one investment at the right level in a value chain can have a significant signaling effect to local suppliers that investing into higher value-added activity will pay off. Since ITC also works with local tanners in improving quality standards, the project is also helping to strengthen the linkages and communications between investor and local suppliers, something that in an institutional sense you had averred to. And this has spillover effects. At full capacity, the leather manufacturing unit will employ over 3,000 Ugandans, of which 80% are expected to be women. 2,400 women will work in this one single unit when it is working at full capacity. I think this example I have given resonates with SDG 9 on developing productive capacities among SMEs and the economic empowerment of women through productive employment as enshrined in SDG 5. While SME internationalization does create benefits beyond the immediate economic gains, there is also the prospect of larger revenues from expanded markets, encouraging investment in technology and innovation. We have, as an institution, development projects currently under implementation that support sustainable business growth in more than 70 sectors. Now, here I must say, for us, a sector is not as broad as manufacturing or services. It could be as narrow as leather or pulses or IT-enabled services across 130 countries. From our perspective, ending poverty and hunger will only happen when small businesses in developing countries, who are the largest employers, across the board have the opportunities to compete in a global marketplace. At the same time, to achieve gender equality, women-owned businesses must be nurtured. These measures and others like them are a small but effective way to overcome global trade barriers and to promote a culture of equality, sustainability, and shared prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Govind. For examples, we return before the discuss. And now I will go to invite Willem Overbosch, founder and CEO, Dutch Net Group, the leaders. Master graduate in organization management students, please, could you give it?
Thank you, Professor Sampaio, for having the opportunity to talk to here. Dear colleagues, thank you for being here. I'd like to talk to you about scaling up and unleashing the potential of SMEs companies in the public-private partnerships, as it's called. And I'd like to give you a short presentation and just take you into the world of the SMEs. As I'm an entrepreneur myself, I have been that for over 15 years now. I hope that I can tell you a bit more about that. But let's first look at the Netherlands. It's a very small country, and let's just take a test. Does anybody know how many inhabitants this small little country has? You're from Europe? Shout out, please. It's only 17 million. And if we're looking at SME markets, it's very good to see the size of a country. 17 million people in the Netherlands, of which 8 million are employed. And if we look at the entrepreneurship, the global entrepreneurship monitor always looks into the potential of people wanting to start a business. And out of these 8 million Dutch people, how many do you think are willing to start a business? Any guesses? How many million would we thinking starting a business? 3%. It's a bit more than that. 3.5 million people are SME ready. Are they starting their business? No, they're not. It's only 150,000 new entrants every year. So that's a very small part of new entrants in the Dutch market. In total, we have 1.8 million entrepreneurs, and this is going to be very interesting, of which 99% belongs to a small, medium or micro enterprise, as we call it, which means by definition that they have less than 250 employees. And the majority, let me tell you, has less than 7 employees. So if we're talking the SME market here, this is the SME market in the Netherlands. So it's only 1% of the companies in the Netherlands that are bigger or larger than 250 FTEs, which is a very small size. That gives you, for this Dutch company, an idea of the market. Now, let me take you into the, imagine basically, if this will work. Yes, there you go. Imagine the average entrepreneur. So how does the average, for as long as it takes, the average entrepreneur look like? Well, it's someone who is basically looking for business opportunities. He wants continuity of his business and no hassle. They do not want to be lectured by anyone. They're continuously looking for business opportunities and new ways to improve their business and move forward. They have to solve their business issues by themselves, as they don't have any staffing there. They're a small team of 5, 6 or 7 people, so they deal with their business themselves. And that's so across the world. If they want answers, they don't have a knowledge base to look at. They go to Google, they take their phone and they look up the answers there. So in terms of knowledge and development, they usually go in their local communities and they in the physical boundaries of their communities. And that's the same thing all across the globe. So this entrepreneur, this is the one that I'm inspired by, this large group of people that's doing their business every day. And when I founded my company in 2004, I thought, well, just let's focus on the SME entrepreneurs. Let's focus on this group with 25 people or less. and try to help them, inspire them, make that group larger, because that's the group of entrepreneurs that really moves the economy forward. And not just in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we've created a platform which is called SME Service Desk. And what we've done, we've basically put all sorts of practical information online. How do you start your business? How do you grow your business? How do you get funded? Where do you get your first employee? And how do you fire one? All very basic, simple things that if you put those questions online, Google will do the rest, because they will use their phone and come by. Nearly 350,000 visitors on a monthly basis on the platform, and 70,000 plus members that are logged in. So that gives us, as an organization, insights that we can share with federations, can share with governments, and can share with our partners to basically create our data-provoking engine. So that's SME Service Desk, one of our platforms. Now, if we look at the SME market in a broader perspective, and I'm slowly focusing out. So if we're looking at the SME market in Europe, that's 99% of all businesses, again, in Europe, which means 21 million companies providing work to over 88 million people. And ladies and gentlemen, that's just Europe. If we go one step further and we look at the rest of the World Bank gave indication of it's about 365 to 465 million SME companies. So that's a large number. So if we're able to move that large of number of SMEs into the 2030 agenda, I think that we're really getting somewhere. Now this was talking numbers. And if we talk numbers, we should look at the global picture, which is 95% of the companies in the world are an SME company. So let that figure go down. 95% of the global workforce, 60% of the workforce is provided by SMEs. So it's a very, very, very large number, and they're good for 50% of the world global GDP. Now let's do this test. Everybody in the room probably knows what this picture here is. Any guesses? Well, yes, it's the 17 goals for global development. Now, if you have a group of small, medium enterprises in front of you, and I've done that a million times, and you show this picture and you ask them, do you know what this means? Only like 4 or 5 out of the 100 hands are raised. And this is 2017, 2018. Now, if you look at that in a bigger scale, and we've done some research under our own group of visitors, a large research, it shows that 80% of SMEs companies in the Netherlands doesn't know or are not familiar with the global goals. And out of that 80%, out of the 20% that is familiar, 80% doesn't know, wants to act, but 83% doesn't know what to do next. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we all recognize and have been recognizing for the past couple of sessions. Now, there are good things happening. You know, we've got the Global Compact Network also in the Netherlands on a local scale. But if we look at the activity on the platform itself, it's very, very limited. If you look at the global perspective, and we've been discussing that for the past couple of days, we've got 10,000 mainly larger corporations and larger SME corporations involved in the global impact, producing their annual reports, something that smaller companies really do not have the time to do. So if you look at the partnerships, we've seen the figures, it's around 3,000 partnerships globally with the UN or other UN bodies. So there's work to be done. And work to be done to get on board the big wave of the SMEs companies. So let's step up and get them into the game. And one of the things that we have to establish is that governments, the educational system, and larger corporations, they basically speak another language. They don't belong to the same community yet. They don't speak the same language yet. And I think that if we can solve that particular hurdle, if we can break through that wall and basically join together and make a partnership there, I think that we can really break something through. Now, if you look at the OECD reports, and this was late 2017, OECD reports that SMEs are basically the most important factor in achieving the goals. We've established that over 70% of global companies are SMEs, even 90% if you look at the informal ones. So get them on board on sustainable development and you move on. My next door neighbor, Mr. Venuprasad, also said that SMEs are very important, even if you look at the south-to-south world it's very important. Global Compact has yesterday told us that they're looking into local markets and local networks in achieving more and more partnership. So that's all very good news. But how to really engage with the local SMEs, business owners, because that's the level that you want to play. You don't want to talk about an SME company, you're talking to someone running the company. So you have to get inside the head of the entrepreneur himself. And how do you answer the questions, if any, about SDGs, and how do you learn from the behavior of the entrepreneurs in that companies, and have you got access to data to do so? Now we've established that it's still very hard to have that data. So let's put on our goggles and look ahead. What can the UN actually do? For one thing, yesterday we talked about stone paper, and we talked about paper on produce of agricultural waste. I've got 2 books here, and they're both agricultural friendly. So what can the UN do? In an invitation to you, Petru, start basically printing on agricultural friendly paper. Another thing that I would recommend is start thinking as a publisher. And publishers, what they do is they are very good at basically at positively influencing behavior through the use of content and information. And that creates a demand-driven platform, because we've seen that 80% doesn't know what's happening. So you basically have to turn the whole dialogue about SDGs around and start, filling in the gaps and talk the same language, so that you can start with the needs of SMEs companies. And the content marketing matrix is a very good there. Thirdly, I think that if you use a narrative digital strategy, which means that making a story about content about the SDGs, and not just facts building, not just big handbooks, to make it smart and make it something that you want to join into. So it's basically pull, get the demand to you, and don't push the information to them. Build a community and identify users. Offer very simple tools. Offer tips, tricks that move SMEs forward on the 2030 agenda. And once you do that online, it's measurable digitally. And then reward them if there's good behavior. And good behavior can be very simple. Someone taking an action by downloading a document, by looking at a certain website, and, well, basically then you know who he is. Now, if you measure digitally, you can also reward in terms of branded logos. Because marketing and marketing with the UN together is a good thing, and a lot of small and medium enterprises do want to have that logo. Accumulate that and you have impact. Now, for example, this is the Dream Catch method created by Oxfam Novib to start discussions about achieving a goal. And if once you can basically draw your dream, once you can visualize your dream, your future dream, you can also realize it. So on the left bottom, you can see the current situation, and at the top end, well, we've been drawing today a future in 2030 with the goals. And every step along the way is a step to be measured. It's a milestone that you have to tackle, with opportunities on the top side and threats below. Now, if you can draw the different steps instead of writing it down, this is a method that helps you talk to your teammates. This is a method that helps you talk to your stakeholders on a very, very, very basic level. And it can be done in any country, because everybody can basically draw a picture. Now let's have a little game. Everybody get their phones out, look at the little screen, pick up your phone, look at the little screen and go to the QR code. Scan the QR code with your camera, and then you probably will see something happening. So the presentation is in front of you or in the big screen. Is the presentation in front of everybody? Oh, the presentation is not in front of you. Okay. Yeah, you scanned it? You will probably see a website looking like this, and you will be able to download the document. So communicating in QR codes is very simple. It's a global communication method, and everybody can do it. And once you've communicated the QR code, you're done. We've made contact. You can start, communicating about the content, and you're in the platform. Now, I would suggest a simple platform together with partners such as my next door neighbor, such as UNSSC, to start really communicating on a publisher way with SMEs. basically give them a certificate if they behave well, because business for good is really good for business. And can you imagine 3.8 million global internet users connecting together on the SMEs? Now, this is what the world of Facebook looks like with 2.1 billion users. Now, just imagine that you can talk to them, all of them, and this would be the UN network about global goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. William. It's very important, these statistics. And in Brazil, it's the same problem. For example, the statistics in Brazil, 18% the SMEs broken, died in 2 years. That's the problem. And start another presentation. Please, at the theme Islamic Banking Finance to Small Entrepreneurs, a case of Kenya. Mohammed Nurulayn, Yorkville University, Canada, and Nurulayn, Binte, Wilfrid, Laurier University, Canada. Please, could you? Thank you very much.
You can start now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nurulayn. I'm currently in my 4th year of my undergraduate degree, just completing it while I'm speaking. I'm very honored to be here today amongst so many intellectual professionals. I'm also very honored to be here and having worked alongside my father, Dr. Noor, on this paper. As you may know by now, this paper is related to small business finance in Kenya. Kenya is a country surrounded by Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Somalia, alongside the Indian Ocean and Lake Victoria. With a total population of 43.5 million people, the dominant sect of faith being Christianity. The small businesses in Kenya contribute greatly towards the economy and national development. A 2014 CNBC News report puts SMB contributions to Kenya's GDP at about 45%. As you can see here, these are a few of the major banks in the country: Bank of Africa, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, Barclays Bank of Kenya, Citibank, Commercial Bank of Africa, Guarantee Trust Bank. In spite of the financing efforts to this sector of the economy, SMEs and micro-entrepreneurs in Kenya are facing the following problems: lack of access to credit facilities, unfavorable lending conditions, high cost of credit, high bank charges and fees, money lenders' exploitations, loans from microfinance and NGOs, institutions, and private sectors. In 2007, an Islamic bank called the First Community Bank in Kenya started Islamic finance for small entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Noor. First of all, I am thankful to Dr. Alam and Petro, and also our colleagues and friends for our OSID. This is the conference that we are expecting since a long time, that where you can express our views about this newly started bank taking care of SMEs around the globe. The first community bank in Kenya, which started its operation in 2007, now taking care of small entrepreneurs trying to invest their money and their efforts to bring these SMEs near to the formal credit facilities. This bank is quite a bit different from other traditional banks. Many may ask that how they operate. The main aim of the bank is to give credit not in cash to SMEs, but in kind, because it is noted in many developing countries of the world that small entrepreneurs, those who are not much educated, face a lot of problem in handling the cash. So the bank wants to be sure that the borrowed money is being used for the productive purposes. Today's conference reminds me the day 1979-25. I was just telling myself that it is UNV, the umbrella project of United Nations Development Program, first appointed me as a lecturer in accounts and finance in Kenya. And I worked there for 6 years, till 1985, under this umbrella project of UN. There I had a lot of opportunities to go to very many places and see how developed the mentality and ideas of small entrepreneurs, but they had lots of problems with finance. Almost after 36 years, at that time I never thought of the Islamic Bank. From 89 to 2000, I had a wonderful time in Sweden, Lund University, where I did my PhD on Islamic banking finance to small entrepreneurs. So this is the country that sent me to many countries of the world and told that you collect data and see and show us that this bank really working. So Turkey, Cyprus, Sudan, Malaysia, Indonesia, all those countries I visited and then collected data while I was writing my thesis. By that time, actually, the Islamic Bank was not introduced in some other African countries like Kenya, an East African country. So I was very pleased to see, and then I had an idea to work on that specific bank. So the Islamic Bank in Kenya, that's where we have developed is a research question, how this bank, the finance, the funding is working, or which mode of fund they use, and how it is succeeding in that environment. Then Islamic Bank based on lender-borrower relationship. This is a customer and the bank relationship, how they develop that one. And then I used my own theory. It is called institutional network theory. I shall show it shortly. There, the societal sectors institution like how country, culture, religion, family clan, political system, legal system, and government influence in this type of financing in particular environment. The research methodology was actually, it was the way to direct interview the bank and ask questions, and I took time to interview different officers in different sectors. And then all this recorded information I did analyze based on my theory. This is what I was talking about, that while doing my PhD in a Scandinavian country, that this qualitative method that I used developed this theory of institutional network theory. And this theory normally based on two sectors. So one is similar type of organizations are grouped. And the next one, outer circle, is called societal sector, where in every SME financing are influenced by country, culture, religion, family, clan, and the legal system and political system. This is the main thing that we need to study when we are doing this funding system, how they are. The SME development not only facing the problem from fund, but they have some other problem in some particular country concern, environmental concern. In many places, country culture become as a barrier. Political system and legal system sometimes does not allow the small business to come up. and then family clan, and also government system, the bureaucracy. So all these things normally create problems in either way, that because of what the small business cannot prosper as it should be. While going through the Islamic banking finance, that we saw that 60% of the manufacturing sector are funded by investment musharaka. This is a simple partnership. Bank will supply the funds in kind and then take part in management. And then if there is profit, and they will share it. And the next one is called Murabaha, cost plus profit. That bank is buying for product for the entrepreneurs, and they are selling them to them again with certain profit. Now, while going through the entire system, that how it worked, 5 years data we have taken in respect of deposit, a great response from customers who are found. Although the majority people are Christian, but this system does not talk about the religion. This is a system that how it works. So that's why the people from all class, they accepted the idea. The only system that difference that in traditional banking, that they are working on interest, and Islamic banking, they are not working on interest. Then this bring them together, that they come near to bank explain them, make relationship with them, and start working. So some places I visited there, 100% customers, they are not Muslim. But they are telling that there is no question of Islam or religion. The question of the system, how it is working. So bank officer is coming to us, talking to us and helping us and giving advice. And if we need, they are taking initiatives to promote our business. So this is what we see. And this is the system that we are following. If you look at the investment, the same we can see that from 868 million, it has become 5471 within 5 years' time. Now, if you look at the profit position, having a little bit ups and down, it has given a good profit, although a newly developed bank. So what I have found in summary, that the research is showing us network relationship between the bank and customer deepens the more they proceed on with their business. And easy access to customers to the bank. In many developing nations, the SME, these grassroots level customers to reach to bank, to talk to a bank officer, they find it very tough. But now Islamic Bank has made it so easy, and the system says it is not the customer to come to the bank, bank goes to customers. Unique administration of borrowed funds, and that is very important thing. A person, he borrowed money for his cultivation. Bank, this is my personal experience, the bank gave loan, 20,000, the local currency. This man, he took help of a middleman, and he made a proposal. For making that proposal to take the loan, he took 3,000 to 4,000 from there. Then this man has very good relationship with bank officers. He has gone to the bank officer who approved the loan, he took about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So by this way, this gentleman who applied for 20,000 loan, he got only 10,000 to 12,000 in his hand. Remaining is gone. Then whenever he got the money next day, he had to pay the dowry for the daughters to get married. And he has spent all the money there. Then 6 months after bank started communicating, bank found that the person who applied for the cultivation, he doesn't have even plot of land. It was a false proposal made by. So in many developing nations, things are happening like that. So there, the administration of borrowed fund like that, before the bank give loan, first of all, not only they analyze the proposal, but directly they get involved in finding the reality of the customer, why he is borrowing fund. And finally, when the product, suppose the cultivation, he needs the seeds to buy, then his bank tells that it is we are buying for you. So that means they get sure that the customer use the money for the same purpose it is borrowed for. They need some guarantor. So these guarantors act as a security to the borrowed funds, serving the clientele's interest. The bank give maximum time or attention to serve the interest of the client. This is the most important thing. I give example, no middleman interference. Bank does not allow any middleman, direct communication. Priority to rural female micro-entrepreneurs. In Kenya, because of Mau Mau, that means the liberation war time, men, they left home. By that time, the female workers, they became more strong, and they came out, they started taking care of children, also working in the field. So the lots of female workers who have expertise, they need money or advice, Islamic Bank doing that one for them. Group-wise loan makes micro-entrepreneurs well organized. Credit in kind rather than cash. That is one of the main the purpose of the bank, the activities of bank. One of the activities of bank, the credit in kind, not in cash. It also found the political system in the country and the government, they are very cooperative. No problem with the government and the country's government or this giving permissions and cooperating with the bank. Country culture and norms and habits, that also does not affect the promotion of SME and the funding by Islamic Bank. As I told, religious faith and beliefs, it never works there. That means it does not have any impact. They are looking for the system, cooperation, not for the religion. Finally, I found if this bank and the customers are given care of or taken care of by the international organizations or international bodies, definitely the growth of SMEs in those countries and all other developing nations, the finance by Islamic Bank will work wonderfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mohammed and Nurulayn, about the explanation, the case of Kenya, and now I think so the idea to make a first question to the presenters. I have a question, and a simple question, and before pay to the door. My question is, in 3 keywords, how can I resolve the problems in SMEs in the world? Because the problems is similar. Each country in Brazil, Kenya, in development countries, in 3 keywords. Could you give a...
Thank you for this. Thanks for this question. The main important thing that which I think the SME development is to be sure that borrowed funds are used properly, and there is a good relationship between the lender and the borrower, and there should be a specific goal in society how it should be.
Well, I think if you're talking three things, well, three things. One, make sure that you have a translator. Start talking SME talk. Start basically converting all the things that you want to talk about on a corporate way to SME level. Make it very practical, hands-on, easy accessible through internet, because I think digital marketing is also something that you can apply to the business we're talking about. Every country in the world almost has access to internet, is what we've learned. So, and the third one would be learn digitally, and learn digitally is meaning measuring and using those insights to improve businesses around the world.
Thank you. I think these are important questions, and I'd like to address it in the developing country perspective. So there clearly the elephant in the room is access to finance. I think Mr. Nurul Islam in his presentation has looked at a particular kind of demographic and a particular methodology. But access to finance is the elephant in the room. I work in Africa, so I'll use the elephant as the model to state the importance of this. I think regulation, what Willem's presentation showed is the high level of informality. Now, people are not operating in the informal sector because they want to. It's just that the regulations, the rules, you know, it's only in the JIU that a person like me will call somebody inspector with respect. But in any developing country, when you use the term inspector, it's with fear. Because it could be a tax inspector, it could be a police inspector, it could be a labor inspector, it could be a water inspector, and all these people can make your life miserable. That's when you drive business underground. So I think regulation is very important to reduce the levels of informality. What is the benefit? The more formal you are, the more you can access services. The more formal you are, the more you're actually contributing taxes. You're reducing the parallel economy. Third is information. We should not, I think the earlier panel made a very important point about clusters. But there is a big difference between clusters, which operate on the basis of network brokerage and excellence, than what we can call monkey see, monkey do, or me too, me too, me too. Somebody starts one, then everybody follows. That is the absence of information. So that is kind of information on enterprise level and information on the market. So for me, three things. Finance, regulation, and information. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Roberto, please. Free.
Yeah, very quickly. I think that we are very convergent in the issue related to communication. I think I already raised that at the very beginning. I think that you developed that. I just complement that the communication is double. It's not just translating what the SDGs or what this is about on one side. It's also to us guys, I mean, working in the system, to understand also what is the logic behind a company. I think that you explained very well in one of your slides was the daily life of a businessman, what's he thinking. We have also to have this translation here. So that's key. The second thing, the business case, I already mentioned that. Business case means a practical example of others also that were successful with a specific case. I mean, I can give you also examples in the textile sector, people asking us, some small companies, how can you really bring us the case of a company improving the health and safety conditions that has increased also the productivity? And we give these examples, 2 or 3. This is a key driver to convince these guys. That's also our experience. And the third thing is being clear on the objectives and the procedures, so that to reduce the expectations for each side. I mean, to alienate the expectations from each side.
Okay. Thank you, sir, Mr. Roberto. And I provoked the presenters because I have an idea about the 3 keywords about learn, about the finance objectives, but I think so the partnership the one key word, the partnership we discuss in this Congress, because the partnership with academy, understand? The partnership with neighbors, other enterprises, and the big enterprise, why not? To show the smaller, what can I resolve these problems? The partnership, perhaps, that's the good idea, okay? And now I prefer to open the floor, please, Malaysia. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Actually, as we know, all of us, SMEs are the backbone of every economy. It is estimated by 90 to 99% of every economy. And the most important development of SMEs besides the partnership, a smart partnership is very important with the multinational companies and also with the public sector. In Malaysia, we have a cooperation for SMEs. We have a bank, and it is cared by the government. The problem of SMEs mainly run by family owners. Most likely, they have no technical know-how of the business they are doing, besides the financial problems. These are the traditional problem of the SMEs to be transformed to large companies. We can see this in Japanese companies, in Korean companies. All the Japanese companies and Korean companies, they were very small companies, starting from home to the factory and associated with the family names. These are the only small and medium enterprises move from being small to large and to multinational. Now we are in digital revolution. The big problem of the small and medium enterprises is innovation. Invention and innovation and inventing new product or new process or new business model is very important to move small and medium enterprises to large companies and multinational companies. Can you please comment on this? Is the innovation issues? Because this is cornerstone of SMEs to develop, it should be innovative activities. Thank you very much.
Any comments?
Thank you for this question. I think it also has to do with getting in the minds of the entrepreneur, because the family-owned businesses in Malaysia and in other countries, it always starts with a question. You know, most entrepreneurs are not looking for know-how or not in the business of innovation. They have simple questions because they have limitations in budgets, limitations in the things that they walk into, or a problem that occurs at some stage in their entrepreneurial life. And when that problem occurs, they are looking for answers. And when you're there, in my opinion, digitally, to provide an answer, and from that point on manage the entrepreneur towards knowledge, then you really match his world to the world of innovation. And that's where you have a very fruitful ground for basically learning the path of innovation and professionalizing the organization towards more formal organizations. So I think that going to the level of what is your question, how can we help, and being there to provide an answer in terms of knowledge, act, what can we do, how can we do it, and the third one this morning in the UNSC presentation was, I don't remember, what can we do, how can we do it, and basically let's do it, I think. So it's very practical, and being on that level gives you the opportunity to reach out to a large number of companies.
Okay, any questions? Okay, Libya, let's go.
Just a question to Dr. Mohammed. Which Islamic models was used most in Kenya? Murabaha, Musharaka, Istisna, which one was used?
It is investment Musharaka, 60% on the agricultural sector.
I see.
Investment Musharaka. So that is mostly they are using that one because you know that Kenya is an agricultural developed country. So agricultural expert side is more than the other. Murabaha they are using, but they're mostly It's called investment musharaka.
Because in literature, usually murabaha was
because
dominated.
in many places, suppose in Middle East countries, I worked for 5 years. In Oman, I was for 7 years. Those countries, they say murabaha, they use a lot. And in Turkey and Cyprus, I saw the same thing, and Indonesia. So, but the Kenya is an agricultural-oriented country. So there, musharaka works very well, like in Sudan. In many places in Sudan, the musharaka works very well. So environment to environment, country to country differs.
Okay, thank you.
Please. Kazakhstan.
Thank you. My name is Gulnash. My question is to Willem Overbosch, founder of CE. You've said that 80% of people don't know about 17 goals. Have you ever thought about the fastest way of spreading the information? Because we all want to have good result. In this case, I think people are not digitalized as we think. Thank you.
Fully agree. People are not as digitalized as we think, but a lot of people have access to internet. So we can start at a very low level. All sorts of initiatives that we've been talking about in the past couple of days show that even a mobile phone with 3G connection gives you access to internet, and I think that's a starting point. The second one is that you have to ask the right question. And we didn't just ask them, do you know these 17 goals? We asked them whether they were doing something in sustainability and if they knew anything about what's going on in the discussion that we're having. But a lot of people, just don't know it yet. And bridging the gap of the digitalization is a very important factor in bringing SMEs forward. And I think that if we're looking at the trends, and my colleague Mr. Suarez-Santos also said that digitization is one of the big challenges to move all SMEs forward. So I think there's a huge effort to be made there.
Okay, thank you. Please, let me see. Australia.
Yes, hello. Look, okay. Do you want to go first?
Australia.
Yeah.
Australia before you.
Okay. No, they put it on mine. They put it on mine.
My name is Mohsin Hussain. I work at Griffith University, Australia. The paper by Govind on South-South trade and investment was quite interesting, looks to me. Why? Because I thought that this particular initiative, perhaps, is going to give southern nations both trade and investment terms. I can bring in this sector, South-South perhaps, not trade and investment, but South-South migration, just an analogy. The South-South migration, as we know, have been really contributing to the southern nation, particularly in terms of sending their unskilled workers to the another southern nations and working up there. For example, in Bangladesh, which I come from, in fact, now having more than $15 billion worth of foreign exchange out of sending people in another southern countries. And my recent work on this South-South migration tells us that really this is a huge thing because, for example, I was a person who was a South-North kind of migrant. I was in Bangladesh, then migrated to Australia, for example. But that has changed, and that change has really contributing to the Bangladeshi people and also the economy, for example. But my point to you, sir, that South-South trade and investment, when you are trying to say that, yes, there are some investment going from India to Kenya or other African countries, and we know China is having a huge investment to the African countries. In what ways, in fact, India and China, at the end, is going to have some benefit out of it? Is that in terms of only making the resources available to those countries, or in some other ways? Do you have any kind of sort of figures for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. This is a very, very interesting question you've asked. Because first of all, if I may, it's so interesting you talk of yourself as south-north migration. That is in an economic sense. But in a geographic sense, you went further south. Now, why am I raising that to address your question? Because very clearly, the focus, I think, of most of the speakers here, and some of the speakers here, most speakers were focusing on small and medium enterprises. And some of the speakers were focusing on micro enterprises in the kind of products and services. Now, the whole thing about what you mentioned, China and India, their intervention in Africa, about anything more than resources, I think we are talking of a completely different demographic of companies. The kind of resource story is spoken by large enterprises that are in the natural resources sector, oil, gas, mining, as the case may be. Whereas small and medium enterprises are not into this sector of business. So while I'm sure there would be others who can answer that, this is not the focus of what we are really addressing, and anything that we may address, sir, with respect, may be speculation. Many thanks.
Okay, more two questions. Please, sir.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, it's you.
Yes, right. Right. This is getting confusing. So this time I'll just introduce myself. My name's Elie Defriend, and I operate a small capacity building firm here in Switzerland. And we do work on the ground in developing countries, promoting sustainable development in the areas of resource efficiency and sustainable production. And we work directly with SMEs and local consultants and national governments, typically funded by international donors or bilateral partners, etc. And the one thing that we've seen in bringing, let's say, sustainable ideas of production to the business owners and their staff in these countries is they all get it. They're totally motivated by it. And every time we go into an SME, they really want to learn how to protect their community, reduce waste, reduce their costs of purchasing of raw materials, and be seen to be cleaner and better, and hopefully get access to export markets. That's clear. And the subject of this session is coalescing the energies of the SMEs. And that energy is there. And I would love to hope that Mr. Overbosch's model of bringing digital networks and bringing these SMEs together digitally one day will happen. But as we still do have a digital divide, we still have to go physically out to these people and explain with local, on-the-ground support. And the challenge I've seen in Rwanda, in Algeria, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, is that the programs that are being run by international donors tend to be structured on 3 years or 5 years. And then you come in, you do your work, and a few people, a few pilot companies, maybe 30, maybe 50. In Algeria, we managed to get 60 companies involved in the space of a year, which is pretty good. But when you look at the number of SMEs in Algeria, it's nothing. And then the program team managing that moved. And then politically, in the Algerian Director General moved. And suddenly we lose all of the counterparts that we were working with. The SMEs are still there. They still want to improve, and the competitors, the other ones in the other towns, they would love to get some of this. But unfortunately, the anchors we have today, which are the national counterparts and the donors bringing the money and the international expertise, they keep moving. And of course, the internet is the solution. The day that we can deliver customized, localized approaches to coalesce the SMEs. But in the meantime, how do we do it?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think the opportunity is there, and basically you gave the answer yourself. Why don't you bring all the companies that you talk to on the ground to the same platform so you don't lose them anymore? Thank you.
I think that's, thank you very much for that statement of yours, which is typical. Go in, implement, go out. Now, I think all of us are faced with this as trade-related technical assistance providers. But for the last 5 years, what we have been adding as a component is there's a very slight incremental cost in doing two things. I'm not saying they're mutually inclusive or exclusive, but it depends on the kind of country environment you're operating in. In Central Asia and in East Africa, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, we have found two ways that we can mitigate this. You can never really eliminate it. One form of mitigation is at a small incremental cost, train independents who can then be multipliers for a small fee, a local national fee. So you are building capacity among independent service providers for a lot of the stuff. We have done this in quality, we have done this in food safety, we have done this in health safety environment, good housekeeping as they call it at the enterprise level. Two is, we never get into a project, ever, ever, without ensuring that a national or a local partner, or a national as well as a more local level partner, is mainstreamed into the project. And never work at the top. I mean, DGs come, DGs go. Permanent secretaries are never permanent. But what you can get there is the mid-level staff who are looking at this, as well as increasing institutional memory through the human resource, as well as the kind of resource, or let's say the information offering, that a trade and investment support institution can provide to SMEs there. Thank you.
May I just add something on that also? Because
It's playing that role of working with the local government, national government. Sorry. Do you see the United Nations as the entity to work with the national governments at that middle level?
Institutional level, you don't need to. Well, I work for a United Nations agency, so yes, I do. But you could you know, in many ways, all of us are driven. You as a private provider, me as a multilateral institution, international organization. Our source of funding is from a donor, right? Now here, we are working very closely, and now many of our donors are beginning to insist on the sustainability as well as what you call the exit clause. So that's where the national capacity building at the industry level, at the institutional level, as well as individuals who can then be service providers in their own right, is very much central to it. So you don't need to, we can be agnostic about whether it's you as an individual or the UN or a bilateral institution that does it.
Very quickly, because I have also a very specific point. I also have been personally doing also development cooperation, also with network of companies on the ground for a short period of my. I understand that there is always a balance between having a permanent development cooperation support when there is a critical mass here of companies also willing to, but there is also sustainability, a transfer of knowledge. And above all, if you have a business case there, the idea is that at a given moment, this go on per se, isn't it? And that's also, for me, the question. I mean, you cannot be continuously supporting at least the same companies if there is a business case. I mean, I just wanted to make this remark because I believe that's important.
Okay, because the time, the last question, please. Okay.
The Kadaji Flat from Algeria. Only some observations. First of all, I want to ask our friend where did he get the figures to assess the assessment or the statement that SMEs are nothing in Algeria out of 1,100,000 companies, sorry, out of the only 15% are big companies. All the rest are SMEs and small, very small enterprises. So it's not nothing. I mean, there's quite a...
Please speak to the mic because we can't hear you.
I meant that the 30 companies we were able to work with, the network of 30 companies, was tiny compared with the number of SMEs in the country.
Okay.
No, it's not because I'm... Okay. No, I'm just reacting to 2 or 3 things. What Willem said, which, of course, I'm very interested in. I think the issue is, of course, to get people and coach them and monitor the process to get them into the business game, and that innovating for them, kind of, because you are bringing a lot of new stuff for people who are not used to that. I think the issue is not to do things for them, not to innovate with them, but to innovate with them. And that is perhaps the most difficult when you come to the South. And I take this opportunity to go, because our friend raised the issue of innovation, to Govind, which, of course, there are a lot of success stories. My question is, to what extent these new products you brought in Africa, have you given the opportunity of capacity building and of actually people doing research and R&D with you to get this product in business? That's a key question. I think, unless, let me, just last point. And to me, this is a key issue now in Africa, how to get from this level of production to higher qualitative level. And the third question is back again to family-based businesses. In family-based businesses, there is not one single model. If you go to the Italian model, it's not solely not the same, the Algerian model or the Kenyan model. So several business-based models. This is what we have to realize. And because, as a friend Nurul said, the business model is also a lot of cultural things. Resistance because family-dominated, clanism, resistant to change, which are completely different what you would find in Europe, for instance. There are a lot of studies who have outlined that. So I think you have also to be careful when you say, well, it's simple, just move with this model, and you get things going. No, it's very complicated. So what is your reaction as well? Govind. Thank you.
Sir, you must forgive me. It's bad manners to answer a question with a question. But what exactly is your question? Because you talked of Japan,
I didn't talk about
family
Japan
business,
at all.
and then you talk
that kind of resistance. Did you find family business? How did you overcome this resistance when it is family
in a family business
dominated there? Yeah.
Well, that was not part of my presentation,
Yeah, but
I can give you an example. One of the things, now, in my earlier answer, I talked about access to finance being the elephant in the room. We were dealing with a family business in Tanzania that was doing very well in commodities. It was highly geared. It was highly geared in the sense that debt levels were high. And they were looking at, attracting some investment. And banks would not touch it because they already had banking limits and things like that. I'm just setting the scene for you. So what we thought is maybe we can bring in private equity into this. There's quite a bit of the new flow of private equity into Eastern Africa especially. The private equity players, they also go through their due diligence. And at one point in time, they said the only good thing that they see about the company is despite it being geared, it has a good network, it has a good potential, and they absolutely adore the chief executive of the company, who was a non-family member.
Yes, sir. In this respect, I think I would like to your point on your role as in the United Nations is managing the funds from more developed nations going to the developing countries in developing SMEs, isn't it? Am I right? Or is that your role, that you are also managing the funds going out of developed nations to developing countries on SME sector? No?
Trade-related technical assistance projects that are then funded by bilateral or multilateral donors, funders. Yes.
South trade and investment. That's my point. You mentioned in the answer to my question was that was the big businesses we are talking about. In India and China's investment in Africa, fine. But what are those SMEs then been funded from another southern countries? Because it is south-south. Your title saying south-south.
Please.
Okay. We'll talk about it later.
Please, I'm interviewing now, no more time. Finish the session. Please, thank you for the question, okay? Thank you for everybody. Thank you.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.